Hi, it's Katrina. From Rockcut Tombs found by accident to a mysterious lost queen, here are 10 surprising recent discoveries from Egypt. Number 10. Valley of the Monkeys. Archaeologists in Egypt have made some interesting discoveries in a place known as the Valley of the Monkeys in Luxor. But unlike the name would suggest, there aren't any actual monkeys here. Instead, the valley was once an industrial area where things were made 3,500 years ago. The Valley of the Monkeys is located on the opposite side of the Valley of the Kings. But it was here where the materials for the many tombs of the royal pharaohs were made. It dates back to the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom between 1543 and 1292 BC, which means it was used for over 1,000 years. It was Egyptologist Zahi Hawass who took the lead on the excavations that went on here for over 2 years. Hawass and his team uncovered 30 workshops that had participated in the construction of funerary furniture, including things like sarcophagi, jars for holding internal organs, and many other artifacts and objects needed to bury the dead with honor. It was basically the Santa's workshop of ancient Egypt, pumping out all the supplies necessary for burying the pharaohs and other elites. The actual site was discovered in the early part of the 19th century by Napoleon Bonaparte and his army. But unlike the Valley of the Kings and the huge pyramids in Cairo, there wasn't much gold to be had in this valley, and so it was left alone until 2011. But that mission was halted due to political instability and didn't commence until 2017. But now we have a much better idea of how the Egyptians manufactured so much incredible stuff so quickly. Number 9. Ancient Rockcut Tombs. Hundreds of tombs cut into the rock in the middle of the desert have been sitting there for thousands of years just waiting to be found. Archaeologists were surveying the Al-Hamidiyya necropolis when they made the unexpected discovery. All across the mountain face, the team discovered the entrances to tombs carved in long rectangles into the rock. They found about 250 of them, though they expect there are more still waiting to be found in the region. How old are these tombs? They date as far back as 2200 BC and as recent as 30 BC. That's a span of over 2,000 years from the Old Kingdom of Egypt and into the time when Egypt was occupied by the Romans. The tombs here aren't quite as impressive as others found throughout the country. They are actually quite small and were probably used for housing the dead bodies of bureaucrats and some of the lower-tier members of society from the local ancient city of Akhmim. During the Old Kingdom, Akhmim was an important administrative center of the government. What's quite interesting is that historians are hoping to find out more about the Egyptian middle class. We already know so much about the pharaohs and the rulers of society from big, exciting sites like Sakara and Luxor. But in this case, we have a chance to see what life was like for the average person, the more business or middle class of ancient Egypt, which might be more relatable than you might think. Number 8. The Queen's Tomb. A strange Egyptian discovery was just made in Turkey, pretty far from Egypt's own borders. A series of tombs were found that date back to around 10,000 years, according to some reports. The tombs themselves are actually Lycian, from a vastly different culture who lived in modern Antalya near the old city of Myra. The ancient Lycians who built these amazing tombs believed that there was a winged monster who would come down from the skies and take the dead souls to the afterlife, and so they often made their tombs far from civilization, usually at the edge of cliffs or high up in the mountains. By now, you're probably wondering what any of this has to do with ancient Egypt. Apparently, archaeological teams realized that the name of Queen Nefertiti was written all over the site. That doesn't really make any sense, because the tombs were made somewhere around 400 BC, and Queen Nefertiti came from the 18th dynasty of Egypt, living between 1370 and 1330 BC. So what in the world would be the connection? It could have been that people in Lycia, even 1,000 years after Queen Nefertiti was dead, still revered her in some way or another, perhaps as a goddess, or perhaps coincidence? It's very hard to say. Number 7. A pregnant mummy. A group of Polish researchers were shocked to discover a mummified pregnant woman from ancient Egypt who they thought was actually a male priest. It all happened after the researchers took the mummy back to their lab and conducted a few tests, mainly with x-rays and computers. They were shocked to discover the tiny bones of the foot and hand of a fetus inside of the woman, suggesting she had been several months along in her pregnancy at the time of her death. As of right now, researchers have no idea why the Egyptians would have mummified a pregnant woman, because as you probably know, Everything from inside the body was usually removed. The embalmer would remove all organs and even a fetus if necessary to place it in its own container with the mother in her tomb. It is very rare to have anything at all inside a mummified body. Researchers have been unable to determine a cause of death. Further tests showed she was about 7 months along when she died, but the circumstances around her discovery are even more confusing. Back in 1826, the mummy was brought to Warsaw. At the time, experts thought it was a male priest because of the inscription on the coffin, which indicated a man of great religious import. But according to anthropologist and archaeologist Marzyna Ozarek-Silka, the team of researchers were surprised when they saw the male priest didn't have boy parts and instead had girl parts and long hair. This is what prompted them to begin their investigation, which has now revealed the only pregnant mummy ever discovered. As for how she was mistaken for a male, it is possible that she was put into the wrong coffin after being pillaged from a tomb. Many of the antiquities being sold throughout Europe in the 1800s came from rather irreputable sources, usually tomb raiders. During this time, there was such a huge demand for mummies and sarcophagi and artifacts that they were just shuffled all over the world. Nobody kept track. Who knows where the poor elite male priest ended up, or what the tomb of this woman even looked like. Number 6. Lost Golden City. Archaeologists have found what they're calling the Lost Golden City. It dates back to the 14th century, about 3,000 years before today. The city is located near Luxor, and it was around during the reigns of some of the most famous Egyptian kings ever, including Amenhotep III and King Tut. Expert archaeologists have been searching for this ancient site for years and have never found any proof of it until now. Betsy Bryan, a professor of Egyptology with Johns Hopkins University, said the discovery of the city is the second most important in the country since the tomb of the boy king Tutankhamun. Excavations began here in September of 2020, at which point archaeologists realized they had something very important on their hands. The city was discovered with its walls almost intact, as well as rooms filled with things from ordinary life 3,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found countless artifacts, including rings and pottery vessels. They found bricks stamped with the royal seal of King Amenhotep III. Archaeologists also found some strange cow burials that are still being investigated, as experts haven't seen anything quite like them before. According to many reports, there have been lots of other awesome discoveries, even though the archaeological site is brand new. Researchers found a bakery with a huge kitchen that likely employed hundreds of people to make bread for the entire city. A residential district and an administrative district were found, and there have been a handful of human remains uncovered as well. But because the Lost Golden City is so new, it will probably take months and years of investigation to get to the bottom of all of the little mysteries. Number 5. An industrial brewery. Deep in the deserts of Egypt near the ancient necropolis at Abydos, archaeologists have uncovered an industrial brewery that dates back even before many of the famous Egyptian pharaohs. The brewery goes all the way back to 3100 BC, 5,000 years before today. According to the Smithsonian, the facility could produce nearly 6,000 gallons of beer at a time. This was way before the pharaohs ever built the pyramids. Instead of giant triangles to honor the dead, they honored them with massive quantities of beer. It's not exactly clear why this changed, but during the reign of King Narmer, beer was a necessary part of funerals and religious rituals. Archaeologists found 8 giant areas where the beer was produced, with each area boasting about 40 pots arranged in a row that would have been filled with grains and water, heated and fermented into beer. It's unclear if beer was used also as just a regular day-to-day drink during ancient times, or if it was just used for important ceremonies. Either way, it was a very important part of life. Number 4. Ancient church ruins. The ruins of an ancient Coptic church were just found in Egypt along with a Roman fort. The discovery took place in the Aswan province, far to the south where Egypt borders on Sudan, or what was once the kingdom of Nubia. The church was actually built inside the ruins of the Roman fortress, dating back to the Ptolemaic dynasty around the year 323 BC. This was after Alexander the Great died, and his general Ptolemy I took over as the ruler of the Egyptian Empire. There was a very bizarre mix of relics found at the site, including a sandstone panel showcasing Roman artwork with the image of a mysterious Roman emperor standing beside an altar dedicated to an unknown deity. The church was actually built out of the ruins of the Roman fort, So it's unclear how long the church was used for or just how many worshippers it had. The Coptic people make up about 10% of Egypt's total population and can be traced back through a long line of ancient Egyptians who converted to Christianity about 2,000 years ago. It would have been these people who operated and lived in the church, though almost nothing is known about them or their activities. Number 3. The Golden Tongue. On the outskirts of Alexandria, researchers recently found mummies buried with golden tongues. Archaeologists were working at a temple on the outskirts of the city when they stumbled upon 16 burial chambers. 2 of the people buried here had tongues fashioned from gold still inside their skeletal jaws. Apparently, the tongues were used to ensure that those who had died would be able to speak once they reached the afterlife, suggesting they may have had speech impediments or had been mute during their lives. The temple in which the golden-tongued mummies were discovered is known as Tabosiris Magna. It was found filled with other golden artifacts as well, including a funerary mask decorated with golden flakes and decorations depicting the Egyptian god of the dead Osiris, covered in gold. In ancient times, gold was usually reserved for decorating funeral masks of important rulers, such as Tutankhamun. Gold was also sometimes molded onto the fingers and toes of the deceased. According to Jennifer Hauser-Wegner, the curator of Egyptian artifacts at Penn Museum in Philadelphia, other golden tongues have been found before as well. This is because gold, to the Egyptians, was an everlasting material that never tarnished and always shone brightly. For those who couldn't speak in life, a gold tongue would allow them to speak with Osiris once they reached the afterlife, thereby being able to bargain for a better fate. Number 2. Egyptian Mud Mummy. Archaeologists have once again discovered another Egyptian first. The discovery of a very rare mud mummy has surprised experts all over the world. It is an unparalleled find, and here is why. The mummy was encased literally in mud instead of the traditional linens and coffin. It basically had a mud shell around it when archaeologists opened the coffin to take a look. It's possible that the mud was used to stabilize the mummy after it had been damaged. Either that, or it could have been something like a poor man's mummy. Someone may have used mud to try and copy what the elite people in society were doing with their dead at the time. The royal Egyptians used a type of resin that was usually imported, and this stuff was very expensive. So mud would have been a more affordable solution that was widely available. The question now is, was this perhaps a common custom? Mud on its own would most likely disintegrate over time, and that might explain why no other mummies like this have been found. But perhaps this was a common practice for the poor thousands of years ago? This mummy dates back to 1207 BC, and researchers discovered it in the wrong coffin. The box was designed for a female who died more recently, though researchers have not been able to find out who she was. It could be that someone robbed the coffin to put their own body inside of it, wrapping a dead loved one in mud and then disposing of whoever was buried there in the first place. Number 1. The Sakara Queen. A new and fascinating discovery has come out of the Sakara necropolis south of Cairo. The vast burial grounds here are some of the most important in the whole country. Sakara is home to over a dozen pyramids, including the oldest in Egypt. There have been thousands of artifacts found throughout the past few decades of excavation, but one of the biggest recent discoveries from this place is the identity of a queen who perished roughly 4,000 years ago. Her tomb was discovered near the pyramid of King Teti, who ruled during what is known as the Age of the Pyramids between 2680 and 2180 BC. But even after the tomb of the queen was discovered, archaeologists couldn't figure out her name. That was over 10 years ago. Then, just a few months ago, researchers came across a funerary temple with the queen's name found carved on the wall and etched onto a fallen obelisk. Her name was Queen Nate, and nobody has ever heard of her before. She is brand new to the world of Egyptology and nobody knows anything about her. But as the excavations continue at Sakara, hopefully more will be revealed about this mysterious queen. There are still 52 burial shafts to investigate at Sakara, over 50 wooden coffins filled with mummies, and uncountable treasures. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite Egyptian discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time!